and welcome to Stay for Dinner, a podcast of cooking, curiosity, and conversation. If you love cooking, hate cooking, have no idea how you even feel about cooking because you have never tried it before, congratulations, you are in the right place. The place at the moment, I am once again outside. I don't know why that is the thing for 2021, but it is. I don't know if it's not wanting to get the kitchen dirty or if it's, it's nice to be outside. I'm liking being in front of a warm grill because it's kind of chilly, and I'm just liking it. So we're going with it. This isn't even a recipe that I normally do on the grill, but it can just be an oven. It's a hot thing. So we're going to go with it. And it is kind of, I guess it's sort of spiritually in line with the origin of this recipe, which isn't even really a recipe. I think I've mentioned this on the show a few times. A really big thing that Haley, my wife, would do early on in the pandemic is make a little lunch with a roasted sweet potato and that being pretty much it, topping it with a little bit of stuff that we'll talk about in a second, and it was always so good. I mean, we would eat this, it's January right now, but we would eat this in July when it was way too warm and we probably shouldn't have been turning the oven on in the apartment. It's good any time of year, but it's really good when it's kind of weather appropriate, and it's nice to have something warm, and you won't mind if the house gets a little bit warmer. But in my case, I'm not doing that because, like I said, I'm outside. So we're just doing it today. It's just literally just a roasted sweet potato with some butter and some tahini and a little bit of lemon juice and a little bit of salt. We read about this initially as a thing that you would get from street vendors in Japan as some just sweet potatoes down in the coals of a charcoal grill. And I believe Haley also read about this specific topping profile being from like an Ottolenghi, I think, an Ottolenghi adjacent chef from his world doing this. And so it's kind of evolved, and Haley's added her own touches, and then I am bringing it to you today, live and direct from the grill. It's just an easy one, and it smells so good. I made one the other day inside, and it just made the house smell so good. And we have this sweet potato that's just been kind of hanging out for weeks. It's like one of those weird ones that's not even orange inside. It's just kind of pale yellow, but it is a sweet potato, and it's getting gross. So I figured this is where it wants to belong. It's not like growing eyes yet or anything, but one end is kind of wilting, and I'm frankly not going to eat that part of it. But I just want to get something done with this sweet potato, and it's going to be lunch today. So it's more of a stay for lunch moment, I think is what I'm trying to say. And my guest today on the show, before I forget, is Alex Scordelis, hilarious writer, director. He's written for Difficult People, The Amazing Difficult People with Billy Eichner and Julie Klausner on Hulu. He has written for a bunch of Triumph specials. He wrote for Billy on the Street. He's a super funny and just incredibly nice guy. I had a really fun time talking to Alex. I think you'll enjoy it. We talked about food and cooking and what else? Neil Young. Oh, and fast food, of course, because we get there eventually on at least one and two shows. And I really enjoyed talking to Alex, and I am let's get into it. Let's do it. It's one of those things where it's like, it's such a simple recipe that I almost find myself wanting to do or say more, but I don't have to. We're just going to embrace the simplicity. Quick check of my ingredients before we get into this. Let's see here. Sweet potato, I have that. Like I said, butter, tahini, have that. Some salt. I like to do like a flaky sea salt. We actually have like a rock sea salt, which is actually a little bit heartier than I would normally use, but I'm going to use it sparingly, and it's going to provide a little bit of nice salt as well as a little bit of nice texture. And then, like I said, squeeze of lemon, but all that stuff is going to come into play at the end. Right now, all we need is a sweet potato and aluminum foil, and normally I would have been heating the oven for like a long time. I just lit the grill and it came up to temperature really fast, And we want to go about as high as like 500. Like we would just turn our oven on 500 normally. And the grill is already right around there. It's a little bit lower than that, actually. I'm going to turn it up. And then I have all the burners of the grill lit, so I'm not going to place this directly on the coals because I think it would heat up even faster than I want it to. I am just going to, there's like a kind of a top rack that's not directly over the heat on my grill, so that's where I'm going to put the sweet potato. And I just wrapped it up in aluminum foil. You want to make a pretty nice seal so that basically you're just trying to keep as much heat as possible inside the jacket of the sweet potato, inside the skin, and it just like, I almost want to say renders, even though it's not fat, like it just breaks down into this beautiful texture. It'll oftentimes like leach a little bit of literally caramel, like sweet potato caramel, like just golden sugar will liquefy and kind of end up leaking into the bottom of the aluminum foil if I let it go for long enough, which I intend to. And another thing I would say is sometimes I'll be tempted like this if I'm going to make one of these, and as I said, you know, one end of the sweet potato isn't looking so nice. I'll be tempted to like cut it off before I do it, but I kind of try to avoid that because I don't want to lose the sort of hermetic nature of the skin around the sweet potato. I like having that sealed, so like I said, the flesh inside, you know, cooks really, really, really nicely. And then honestly, I just let it rip for like until it smells good. That can be half an hour. Usually we like to let it go for like an hour. So I'm just gonna leave it on here for, yeah, like maybe 45 minutes and check back in, and we'll see how it's looking. All right, here's the secret. I said I was gonna check back in about 45 minutes, got distracted with some work stuff, the timer went off, I snoozed it, and I ended up letting it go for like an hour and 15 minutes, and the heat climbed in that time. I think it was, by the time I came out, it was like up to like 520, 540. I didn't even know it could go that high, but it did, and I think that's okay, or maybe even positive. I mean, I've let these go for a really long time before. Obviously, you don't want to like leave the house or you know, otherwise be unsafe. But other than that, it's pretty much just its own little self-contained flavor universe that's building up in there, and things are melting down, and the texture is also with these like white sweet potatoes. The texture is a little bit starchier to begin with, so kind of wanted to give it some time, and boy did I. So now I'm just excited on like a science experiment level to see how this, okay, yeah, definitely some give to it as soon as I picked it up with some tongs, and we'll just see how this is. I already turned the heat off on the grill. I can kind of tear it right open because in my experience, aluminum foil, it's thin and it, you know, the heat disperses quickly, not in the sweet potato itself. Okay, it's kind of got a little bit of orangey blackness to the skin that it didn't have before. There's very clearly some points where some sweet potato caramel was leaking out, and I'm just cutting it open here, and it's cutting super easily with just a butter knife. Oh my gosh, I think I could have let it go for even longer. Because it's soft inside, but could be even more. Some of that might be a function of that it's drying out a little bit more, but it smells fantastic. I mean, as soon as I came outside, I could tell. And then I'm just going to take some pats of butter, slide some butter in there like you would do pretty much any like baked potato or anything. And then some tahini. Drizzling that in. And this is a big sweet potato too. I think that probably had something to do with it. The tahini's pretty solid right now, but as soon as it gets in there, it's kind of breaking down, melting, liquefying from the heat. And I mean, here's the bottom line. You take a sweet potato, you put it in a hot oven, wrapped in aluminum foil for a really long time, until it smells really good. It gets all really melted and broken down in there. You put just about anything on it, it's going to be good. The topping of your choice. Experiment, play around, figure out what your signature sweet potato is. I have a little lemon wedge here. It's nice to have that acid because this gets really rich, a little sweet. And then finally, the sea salt, little sea salt with a little texture over top. And the tahini and the sweet potato just play super nicely together. That's always very enjoyable. Oh yeah, it's one of the less pretty ones because again, it's not a classic sweet potato look, but it still looks delicious. You look at it and you know that's gonna be a good lunch. I'm excited about it, and I think you are going to enjoy this conversation that I had with Alex Scordelis. I sure did. Here it is. Well, Alex Scordelis, thank you so much for joining me. Obviously, it is not such a time that we can share a meal in real space. So all I can do is wish that the last thing that you had to eat was both delicious and satisfying.
Hi, DC. One, thanks for having me on. And
my pleasure.
Two, yes, I had a delicious and satisfying meal this morning. It was slightly interesting too. I usually don't eat interesting things for breakfast, but yesterday was my wife's birthday, and she's an amazing baker, but she didn't want to bake on her birthday, didn't want to make her own cake. So we got a galette des rois from the restaurant Petit Trois, which is I'd never had a galette des rois before, but it's a French pastry cake. Are you aware of a galette des rois?
I am not. What does it mean? What is it? I have no idea.
It's a French pastry, like a flat round, and it's traditionally eaten in January, and it's tasted phenomenal. But the thing with it is that inside the cake, they hide an almond, and whoever finds the almond has good luck for the year. And so we had the cake yesterday, but I had leftovers with coffee this morning for breakfast.
And have you found the almond yet?
The cake was so good when we had it last night that we cut it up and we delivered it to friends around the neighborhood, and a friend nearby found the almond.
Wow.
So she'll have good luck for the year. But interestingly, I was unaware of a galette des rois, but I'm Greek, and the Greeks have a very similar tradition, which I do every year, which is a round, flat sweetbread called a vasilopita. And I bake that every New Year's Eve. And in a vasilopita, you hide a coin in it. And whoever finds the coin has good luck for the year. So see, I didn't know the French had the same tradition. But
I didn't either, but it seems, I don't know, it's interesting to me that there seemed to be, like, as you're saying it, I'm realizing, like, there seem to be these different traditions all over the world of, or maybe just in Europe, and then but like of a cake that you like, there's a hidden thing in, and whoever gets it is like the special one, you know what I mean? Or that it's good luck or whatever. Like, it makes me think of in New Orleans, like the tradition of like king cake, where I think it's braided, and then somewhere within it is hidden, like, I honestly don't remember. It's like a crown or a little king or a little, like, I feel like there's like a little like figurine or just like extremely non-edible thing that's hidden in there. I kind of like the idea of an almond, just from a perspective of like,
yes,
if I just munch my way through it, it's not going to be like I'm not going to spend the year where I'm supposedly going to have good luck getting thousands of dollars in dental work.
Exactly. You know, people always ask me have you ever swallowed the coin in the vasilopita, the Greek cake? And it's never happened in my life. No one's ever swallowed it. usually like wrap a quarter in tinfoil, and you'll bite into it. But I didn't know about the New Orleans tradition. A king cake. I don't speak French. My wife does, but I think a galette de roi is king cake.
Oh,
I think I could be. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I was wondering. I meant to ask. I don't really know any French, and one of the things that I find so challenging about it is the vast difference between how it looks written out and how it sounds. And so that makes sense, like ROI, like king, but I was not putting that together. I meant to ask you, like, what does the Dewa part mean? Because I just could not grok that for the life of me. Interesting. Yeah. So I wonder if there's a relationship there. And if once it got to New Orleans, they were like, well, we have a bunch of these like little, I honestly can't remember what it is. If it's like, it might just be a coin, it might be something else, but I'm pretty sure it's not just an almond, but I do like like I said, the edibility of the almond factor. Have you guys eaten out from Petit Trois a lot, or did you used to go back when it was, eating inside restaurants was a thing we could do?
Yeah, we haven't done. My wife maybe has done takeout from there. I have not done takeout from there. We would go occasionally. We love it there. We don't go that often. I know they opened one in Sherman Oaks that we would go to. And it's they do like an egg McMuffin. It's obviously not a McMuffin, but it's it's the same thing, but it tastes incredible. And long answer to the question, yes. We would go there beforehand, but not during the pandemic.
Oh man, that we still have not been to or done takeout from Petit Trois itself, or just like popped in to have a drink. I know a lot of people would. I remember talking to people who would like do that as just kind of a like, yeah, it's like you can just kind of, it's, you can just like go and get a drink and an appetizer, and it's really super good. And then you don't have to worry about like trying to like really like get a seat or whatever, because it was, I guess, in the old world, like kind of a hot spot. But we did go, and I think it's no longer open, but the restaurant that it spun off from, Trois Mec, we went to once. My now wife took me there when we were still dating, I think for like an anniversary, or maybe it was for like I don't think it was for my birthday. I can't remember. Anyway, some special occasion we went there, and it was truly the best meal I've ever had. I think.
Oh yeah.
It's just like,
yeah, I had the same experience there. It's incredible. And we would do a similar thing. It's like a place you would go on an anniversary. But if it's not like a special occasion, they do have like, I think literally like 3 or 4 seats at the bar. And you can like drive by and peek in the window and see if they're open, and then just like dive bomb in and try to grab one of those seats. And have, like an appetizer and a cocktail and get out of there. But it's incredible.
Oh, it was I think we had the 2 things that really stuck out to me were they made this, I think it was just called like potato tea, where it was like in a little kind of like earthenware mug, and there was a like tea bag in it. And I don't know, I'm assuming there was some element of like dehydrated potato or whatever, but the tea just had the like richest, deepest, most savory, like potato flavor. It tasted like if you've ever had like a salt baked potato, like that, like what that potato skin tastes like, but in a like, it wasn't really a beverage. It was more of a soup. I think they were just being cute calling it potato tea, but it was just so, that was tremendous. And then the other thing that I remember really being blown away by was there was a like broiled eel over a white chocolate mashed potatoes, which sounds like a parody of fine dining, right? Like it sounds like a thing where it's like, why would anyone eat that? That actually sounds terrible. But it was so good. Like just one of those bites that you have where you're like, how would anyone ever arrive at this and know that it worked, because there's no way it should work. And it was one of the best things I've ever eaten. It was
cool. I think you hit the nail on the head that like it seems like it would be a parody of fine dining, but it's very non-fussy. And I forget, it's like the Trois Mec was in like a vacant pizza restaurant, right? It's like in a strip mall, very like non-assuming, not intimidating kind of place. And a lot of fun to eat at.
Yeah, I feel like they were very early to the kind of annoying, I think, trend. Although now it's sort of like complaining about anything about restaurants is just sort of like, it feels weird to do because it's just like, I wish that they were, I don't know. Obviously they're having a really, really hard time right now. So it's just like any restaurant, no matter how obnoxious or whatever, we just wish you the best. And we hope that you're like surviving during this time. But yeah, the trend of like I feel like it's usually a restaurant or a bar or whatever, like occupying a space with an old sign and then not like changing the sign at all or doing anything to really indicate like this is a restaurant in here or a different restaurant than the cheesy pizza place that the sign says. It was just like a very sort of like chain LA pizza, I think called like Raffalos or Raffalos or something. That was that they then were just like, okay, there's now a sign next door that says Petit Trois. That's kind of our like bar, but the actual restaurant just has an old pizza place sign that on the one hand I'm like is cool, and then on the other hand I think I'm thinking of specific other instances of this that I've seen where you're just like, this is just rubbing gentrification in everyone's face. It feels like,
completely.
Does that make sense?
I mean, this is like an old example, but the first thing that pops to my mind is the bar Pianos in New York.
Yes, right. Exactly. That must be, I feel like that must be a very important early entry in that genre, if not literally like the first one of just going like, this place used to be, I don't know, somebody who probably like came over here and like got off at Ellis Island and like, and then now it's a place where like alt comics can hate each other.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's a confusing trend because I've been to places where I thought I was going to what the sign said and it was not that at all.
Like, can you think of a specific instance?
There's a place on Sunset. I think they've since changed the sign, but it's now called Wood. And I like met somebody at Wood, and it was like the sign was for a barbecue place, but it was like for like wood-fired pizza. And I forget what the original sign was a barbecue restaurant, but they had wood fire, and I was like looking forward to the barbecue. But it was like artisanal pizza, and I was like, oh. Man.
That place seems like they were really pivoting off the sign. Like it wasn't sort of like, okay, it's clearly like now it's like a secret after hours club, but it just says like hardware store on the front. That place was like, we have a sign that says Wood on it. Like what can we do? I think I know the pizza place that you're talking about. That's like sort of over that like bridge, right? That like I think like Silver Lake Boulevard runs under there, or Hyperion maybe.
Yes,
like
right
one
there.
of those. It gets
that bridge by that Silver Sun liquor store, which I've never been, but which is that band was the Silver Sun Pickups. Is the band based off a liquor store. Well, I don't know if I've ever heard that band. I think I may have seen them like on Last Call with Carson Daly 20 years ago, but I've never. I don't know. I just know that they're based on a liquor store.
That checks out. I feel like I remember, I don't know, they were sort of a very kind of like I am sure that you were right in the zone with this stuff. The MP3 blog revolution of the mid to late 2000s. I feel like they were a sort of like kind of a darling of that world. And I think I had a few of their MP3s. I sound fucking ancient. Jesus Christ. But I just remember them as, it was in a weird period of time where I feel like because they were from LA. And then after moving there, I was like, oh, that's where like the band is from. That's cool. And just like that, but it was such a specific time in music in culture when people were like, can a band come from LA? Is that allowed in the 2000s? Do they have like culture in Los Angeles? Surely you jest.
No, they're completely of that genre. I literally think they felt like a band that was formed to perform on Carson Daly. Like, I don't know. It's LA seemed like this cultureless void. It seemed like that to outsiders, but there was obviously culture going on here.
Right. I remember like, and I remember like sympathizing with the wrong side of this at the time, but reading an interview with, I think it was with the band Health, which is like two dudes, and again, very 2000s, just like single short name, impossible to Google. And I remember because they're from LA, I think, and the band was talking about like, they were just saying like, yeah, we're from LA, and people ask us like, oh my God, like, how do you live? Like, what is it like? And they were just like, I just remember him saying like, it's not that bad, dude.
Yeah, no, it's a very livable place, a nice place to live and play music. And Good. Yeah, good for health, wherever health are at right now.
And their name is getting more and more impossible to Google by the second, given that we are in a health crisis
in these times.
But I would love to know, like, where cooking does or does not fit into your life at the moment. It sounds like your wife is maybe continuing to bake a lot, so much so that she was like, it's my fucking birthday, I'm not doing it today. But like, how is that playing into your family's life at the moment, or not playing in?
Yeah, it's a huge part of our life. It's obviously, during the pandemic, it's done like a 180, which is my wife Melissa is the best cook I know, phenomenal cook, amazing baker. But during the pandemic, we have a toddler who's going to turn 2 next month. And so early on, like in March, we stocked up on food. And because the baby needed to like be fed and put down and like bathed and put down, that process takes like an hour and a half. And so I just felt for my wife, I was like, while you're doing that, I'll cook and do the dishes. And that trend has stayed the whole time. So I went from somebody who would like cook maybe once or twice a week to now I do almost all the cooking, except for like 2 or 3 nights a week. My wife will cook because she loves to cook, but I do the bulk of the cooking now. And my cooking has improved vastly during that time. And then the one thing that my wife does that I'm very excited about is there's another family in our neighborhood, and we have a baking club with them. So my wife will bake on the weekends, and this other family will bake on the weekends, and we swap desserts. And that's been another silver lining. Spending time eating a lot of baked goods.
Oh, that's phenomenal. I also love the idea of making, because it's like, it's fun to like make stuff, but then sometimes by the time you do it, there just isn't the same charm for something that you've made yourself. There's obviously a lot of like pride in it, but sometimes there's also just a little bit of a like, I'm sick of this thing, I put so much work into making it, and then the eating of it can be sort of an anticlimax, whereas you're getting all the fun of making something, but then you get to trade at least some of it with somebody else, and then also earn the novelty of something that you didn't make, that somebody else made for you. I love that idea.
Yeah, there's something nice about eating something that comes from another household. You're like, oh, this is what they're eating, and yeah, we give half of what we made to them, and they give half of what they made to us. So we still get to eat what Melissa baked and get to enjoy something that another family is eating.
Is there like an arms race aspect to it, where or like any amount of one-upsmanship, or do you feel a certain kind of like, well, they made this last week, we gotta like step it up?
It's never been verbalized. It's never been said, but definitely like the quality of things, or like the amount of effort that goes into it, has escalated like an arms race, for sure. Trying to think, like, the other family made these incredible like homemade donuts, which donuts I think are hard to make. I don't know, but these were like the best donuts I'd ever had. And so yeah, it'll ramp up from time to time, but it's not openly competitive.
I've never, to my knowledge, made donuts. I think Haley, my wife, has made some donut adjacent things, but I would imagine that the part of it that seems the most daunting is the like frying. Like we kind of forget that donuts are fried. And so just the idea of like, I don't know, just anytime you're like frying anything in an actual amount of oil that you need to fry anything, it just feels like, oh boy, this is a lot. And the house is going to smell like fried stuff, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just like, it's definitely a commitment.
Yeah, there's a smell to it. It seems like semi-dangerous. I don't know.
Sure, yeah, the spitting yes. Grease and
grease
for
everywhere.
Sure.
Yeah, I used to in New York. I lived near. I had a writing partner at UCB named Chris Shell, who's my favorite person in the world. I don't know why I'm telling the story, but he lived in an apartment building, sadly, that burned down because one neighbor was frying, and the next door neighbor was a hoarder that hoarded newspapers, and just like a bad combination.
No.
Everybody was fine, like nobody was harmed, but I was like, the idea of a fire being started by someone who likes to fry a lot living next door to somebody who hoards newspapers.
And that's just an assumption that I think you have to make in New York, is that like, you're like, let me just assume baseline, unless I live in like one of those, like from the last 10 years, like giant condo, like skyscraper complexes. Like, let me just go ahead and assume that my neighbors on my immediate left and immediate right are like insane hoarder
Yes, for sure.
People who like still think that Eisenhower is president.
Yes, somebody
seems like a safe assumption.
Yeah, newspapers piled from ceiling to floor is who's living next to you at any given time in New York.
Did you cook back in New York as well, or has that been a kind of an LA thing for you?
No, we cooked in New York also. Yeah, we've always been big home cookers. Mostly my wife doing most of the cooking. Yeah, in New York it was a lot of fun. We lived in Greenpoint, and we'd like walk to the Williamsburg Farmers Market and go to and get we'd get fish there. I know, and go to the Union Square Farmers Market. Yeah, cook at home. Were you a big New York cooker, or were you more of like a takeout person?
I was not, but I think that had to be like kind of it's tough to know how much, and this is true of also I think just like people's perceptions of the sort of like cliche LA versus New York things. You kind of have to think about like also what time was it in your life, not just like what is inherently true about the characteristics of each one of the cities, by which I guess I mean like part of me is like, oh yeah, no, I never cooked in New York because it's like the kitchens are small and the whatever. And it's like, no, I was also like 22, you know what I mean? So it was just a less of an active part of my life. And I was just okay with having Chinese food from the same place across the street and, bacon, egg, and cheeses for 5 out of 7 meals, basically.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It's tough to know the balance.
Yeah, I think in New York, like when I was in my early 20s in New York, up until I was like late 20s, 30, like eating at Chinese restaurants and diners was like a huge part of my life. It wasn't until I met my wife, till I met Melissa, that like, because she just loved to cook and we would cook all the time. But yeah, eating out in New York all the time.
I remember I had a friend who was like, after we graduated, because I went to NYU, was like, we got, let's like get you some like cooking stuff and it's very easy and whatever. And I just remember like now knowing like what a big part of my life and how much I enjoy it and just how much like space in my life it occupies. I just remember hearing that and just feeling like no part of that is happening. All of that sounds miserable to me.
Wait, at NYU, like anybody who ever went to NYU always talks about the Chick-fil-A at NYU. Is that a real thing?
It is a real thing. So yeah, so there is Jesus, how much time do you have?
Well, no, because people are like, I did not go to NYU, but people would be like, I know someone who goes to NYU and they can sneak you into the Chick-fil-A. I'm like, what are you talking about? What is the, like, because at that time Chick-fil-A was nowhere outside of the South or whatever. And
right. Yeah. So there was, in Weinstein, which is a like, sort of like a storied old, incredibly shitty dorm. It was very sort of like built in the 50s, or not built in the 50s. Like I want to say like probably like late 60s, early 70s, when it was like, okay, this is after like all of these like campus, like, actions and marches and stuff, where all these university heads are thinking about is just like defensible space, right? Like how can we basically make our dorms into like fortresses? So it's a very ugly, and just like, and it's that part of, time, I feel like, in like postmodern design, whatever. Anyway, completely kind of like dank feeling, not very big, for NYU anyway, like dorm, like right on kind of the edge of Washington Square Park. And so there's downstairs below it, there is like a big basement, like dining hall. And that is just your like normal everyday dining hall with just like Cisco, whatever food suppliers, just like normal dorm food. But then on the ground floor is a dining hall where it was like, and I feel like a lot of colleges have this, where it's like, okay, you have just sort of your normal everyday, you can go get a sandwich or like a thing of, basically hamburger helper kind of dining hall food. And then we have like a couple of like fast food chains.
Yes.
And so that was the sort of like the upstairs dining hall. And within that, I feel like when I first started, my freshman year, they had like, that was mostly just like, you can come just get like a sandwich, and it's not branded in any particular way. It's just like, says like Sandwich World or whatever, it's very generic. And then shortly thereafter, I want to say my sophomore or junior year, it switched to being like, now there's a Quiznos and there's a Pizza Hut or whatever, and there's a Chick-fil-A. And it was like such a novelty. I never had Chick-fil-A growing up, even though I think, because I was growing up in Arizona, I think it was probably an option. But yeah, it was like nowhere north of the Mason-Dixon line. And it was also a weird thing because I think we were aware that Chick-fil-A had like bad politics, basically. Yes. It was like donating to like anti-gay causes and all of this stuff. And so it was like a weird thing. I feel like there was this weird, and maybe I'm just like giving myself the benefit of hindsight. I feel like there was this weird understanding that's like, but they don't do that anymore, right? Or do they? Or whatever. Or anyway, I already spent this money on the meal plan, so I guess I might as well get Chick-fil-A. Like there was definitely a lot of like equivocating going on that like morally made it okay to eat Chick-fil-A because it was like rare. And we were paying a lot for the privilege. But yeah, it was definitely a thing. And even after I graduated, still knowing kids that were behind me that were in like sketch and improv groups and stuff, and it would be like, okay, I'm gonna come like coach your team, and then you're gonna like swipe me in, and I can still get Chick-fil-A or Quiznos or whatever. And then NYU kids are just like, look, I'm paying so much money, I'm taking out so much like student loans, and I just have all this like campus cash that I need to get rid of. Here, have 6 naked juices and like a chicken nuggets, basically.
So you would need to get swiped in, right? So when people say I can sneak you in, like there was security there. You could, like, a person couldn't walk in off the street and go to the Chick-fil-A.
Exactly. They had to, I think it was a combination of, I think it was mostly just that you had to get like, you had to show like an NYU ID at the door. And then I think after a while it became like, you have to literally like swipe in. Like there is a gate that will not, it's not just sort of like a security guard who could or could not be paying attention, or you might be friendly with and just be like, this is my brother. Like you had to be able to like actually like swipe in. But I do think you could swipe in a guest. I think that was a thing. Or maybe you had to like sign somebody in, and it was like, but you're in college, so you have all the time in the world to do this shit. So you don't mind the bureaucracy of it.
Yeah, I went to college at UC Santa Barbara, and we had a very similar food court with like a Wendy's and a Panda Express, but there was no security. Anybody could walk in. Like it wasn't nothing exclusive about it. But yeah, I was always fascinated by the NYU Chick-fil-A. But yeah, I didn't know about their politics till much later. I know, like growing up in California, people would always whisper about In-N-Out's politics. That there's like Bible verses hidden on the bottom of In-N-Out soda cups.
Yeah, I know that I think In-N-Out is in a weird space of sort of like where it's just, it is known that they are like, it's kind of a Christian company. They definitely kind of like wear that, like you said, if not literally on their sleeve, like underneath their soda cups. But I don't, and I don't know, and I'm desperate to not find out if they actually have, like if they have like a record of donations to really, you know, like bad, like anti-gay and other stuff and discriminatory causes.
Yes.
Because that would be depressing. That would be a bad thing to have to cycle out. Although in general, I mean, I don't know. It's just very much like when you look under the hood about just about anything in corporate America, it gets very dicey very fast. Like I remember hearing that like, it's like, oh, Blue Moon is like donating to like pro-life stuff. And then I remember because Haley, my wife, really likes like that. It's not a big beer drinker, but like when we were first dating, it's like, oh, that's a kind of beer that she likes. And then knowing that and then sharing that. And then you just feel like, hey, you know, this thing you like, now it comes freighted with some shittiness. Yeah. Have fun. Anyway, enjoy. And then you feel like a dick.
Yeah. You don't want to look under that hood. I do know the weird thing I heard about In-N-Out, which is like not verified whatsoever, is that when I was in college, people would say that every In-N-Out has the same layout, and that like the altars in Catholic churches, the cash registers all face due east. And I was like, I don't know. It seems like the craziest urban myth that like that In-N-Outs are basically like Illuminati temples.
Oh wow! I immediately thought of the big famous one on Sunset that people like go to after the Oscars or whatever. And I was like, does it? And then I was like, yeah, the counter faces east.
I don't know if they have similar layouts. And then I also heard there's the thing that every In-N-Out is like, it has to be within driving distance of In-N-Out headquarters.
That I didn't know, but I mean, like they do make a big deal of like how fresh the ingredients are. And that's why they like won't like expand everywhere, because they want to keep it consistent, I guess.
Like you have to be able to drive from In-N-Out headquarters to the In-N-Out location like before sundown. Like there's some weird rule.
That's the most specific Springsteen song.
These are all things that like I heard in the dorms in college. I cannot vouch for any of this being true. But
well, I mean, In-N-Out also kind of like, let's say, like fosters that a little bit because they have like their secret menu and stuff. Like they definitely want you to have a certain kind of like benevolent burger Illuminati impression of them.
It's very Da Vinci Code of burgers kind of thing.
Did you have a like that relationship to it when you were in college? Would you get like weird shit from In-N-Out, or did you have like your specific order, or were you pretty much just like had a pretty normal relationship to it?
I had a weird order in college because there was an In-N-Out right near our campus in Goleta, California, and I would get a double meat, no cheese, ketchup and mustard only, which sounds gross now. I don't know why I was eating that in college. It's that was my college order though. To answer that question.
So I'm sorry, no meat.
No, it was double meat. So 2 patties.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I would do 2 patties and just like ketchup and mustard only. Like no greens, no tomato, no cheese. I don't know what I was thinking.
That's so interesting because it does feel like missing out on a lot of what makes In-N-Out, which is like you can get it animal style, or you can get it this, or you can get it the like burger sauce or whatever. Just there's something just very, a little serial killery about just double meat, ketchup and mustard.
I was getting it completely wrong. I will say like around that time, I graduated from high school in 1999, and somebody in my high school class, or a friend of mine, to honor our class, ordered a 9x9, which you could do at the time. You can't do that anymore.
Oh, interesting.
And ate a 9x9 in honor of the class of 99. And then when I got to college, I told that story to a guy in the dorms, and he was like, I'll eat a 10x10. And it did turn into an arms race where like I've known somebody who's eaten, I think the biggest one was a 13x13. In one sitting was the rule, like without leaving the In-N-Out. They don't even like when you order a 13x13, it doesn't stand up. You have to like lay it in its side in the box, and is the grease dripping from it just like soaks through the box. It's disgusting. But I've seen people do this.
I remember it does seem like a thing that is specifically directed at like teenage boys and like college kids, basically, like just this idea, like learning. Because I remember like we first got In-N-Out in Arizona when I was in high school, and it just like that thing like rippling through the like drama club basically of like you can get it's called like I think like the biggest I ever went was like a 4x4 or maybe a 5x5, but it's like it's blank by blank, and then that's how much meat and cheese they will give you. And I think it was that the idea at the time was basically it's like there's no limit. Like the only limit is your allowance.
Which I think they've capped it. I think they have a rule in place now. I could be wrong. I feel like I've gotten word. I think they've capped it at like a 4x4 or 5x5. I don't think you can go extreme there anymore. I could be incorrect, but I think there must have been an incident at some point with somebody eating.
I think I speak for both of us when I say that this is clear evidence that PC culture is clearly out of control.
Yeah, we need to rein in the woke mob. The woke mob has ruined the 13x13 for us.
Oh man, yeah. There's one part of me that is like, that's disgusting. A 13x13, and then there's another part of me that's like, I could do that. I could do it right
now. You think you could do it? You would be down?
No, I don't think so. I genuinely think like sitting here right now, mid-30s. I'm in decent shape. I've been running. I think like I think I would. This is. Wait,
have you done an eating challenge in the past? Have you done like something like this before?
Not real. I mean, not a genuine one. I honestly like almost all of them were. Again, like high school things where it's sort of like finding out like, you can't drink a gallon of milk in an hour, and then trying to do that. And it was also like when Jackass was really big. So It was just like, that was a big part of it. I haven't done any real sort of like competitive eating style challenges that I can think of since like trying to drink a gallon of milk like once in high school. And then I think then that kind of like in college or my early 20s, that was like a thing that went around again, and some friends tried, and I can't remember. I genuinely can't remember if I took part or not, or if I was like, I've tried before. I was throwing up in a garbage bag in a park in high school. I know you can't do it. I don't need to try again. But but I don't think I've ever participated in any sort of real competitive eating level eating with that in mind. Have you?
Not really. I knew my high school there was a chicken restaurant nearby called Cluck You Chicken. And they had a thing called the 911 challenge, which you had to sign a waiver on your life before you do it. And I've seen people try it. Well, wait, actually, okay, this isn't an eating challenge. This is extremely embarrassing, but I did do somewhat of a challenge this week.
Oh, wow.
I lost a bet in my fantasy football league. This is so embarrassing to admit this outside my fantasy football text group, but I lost a bet. And at some point, in the fantasy football text group, people were talking about drinks they'd had in college. And I think it was Chris Shell, who I mentioned before, mentioned that in college they would drink something called the Flaming Dr. Pepper, which is a shot of amaretto mixed with a shot of 151 rum.
Okay.
Then you light it on fire, and there's a huge flame jumps out of the shot glass, and you drop it into a pint of beer and drink it. And it's called the Flaming Dr. Pepper because I guess it tastes like Dr. Pepper.
Huh.
And so I lost a game in the playoffs, and the loser had to do that and film it and send it to everybody in the text group. And I did that this week.
And what was it like? Describe that experience. I have to imagine that there was a certain emptiness to it, given that I imagine you're not doing it around a bunch of people like chanting. Like, what was? Tell me everything.
It was extremely humiliating. I did it alone in my garage with I have a device that can hold my iPhone to a microphone stand. So put the microphone stand, put my iPhone there to film myself. 151 rum is very hard to obtain. It's not illegal, but Bacardi stopped making it because it's basically lighter fluid. The bottle of it I got says danger flammable on the bottle. It's the highest proof rum you can get. And I had a pint glass. I filled it up with Stella. My wife had amaretto, I guess, because she uses it for baking, and which I don't normally drink amaretto either. So, and I'm also not a big drinker. I usually have a glass of wine a few nights a week and an occasional beer, but I'm not a big drinker. So I was dreading doing it. And I've not admitted this to anybody in the fantasy football league or to anybody period. But before I did it, I Googled how to chug a beer. It's not something I've attempted since college. I don't think I'm not a guy who's going to try to drink a beer in one gulp. What I learned is you take I can't believe I'm explaining this. You take here's how to chug a beer.
Please, yes, this is service journalism.
I looked at a wiki how on how to chug a beer, and it was you obviously tilt your head back, you swallow once to lubricate your gullet, I guess is the correct term, and then it just let it flow down your throat after that. Don't swallow, just let it go down. And so it took me 2 takes to do it. The first take, I was disgusting, and I spit it up. And then, it just dribbled all over my face. And I quickly deleted that video and tried again. And the second time I got it, and it was fine. It wasn't that bad.
And how did you light the shot in the first place, or what was this? What was the setup like, or is this on a workbench or a card table?
It's on my workbench in the garage. I did it. I'm in my garage right now. I'm looking at the workbench right now. I used one of those like a barbecue lighter, one of those long stick with the trigger.
Okay, that tracks.
And the first time I did it, I also did a take where I lit the shot glass. And the flame, I was not expecting it. The flame was blue, bright blue. So it was super hot.
Oh, yeah.
And so I lit it and I was staring at it for 15 seconds. I'm God, I got to do this. This is horrible. And when I went to hold the shot glass, it had gotten so hot that I couldn't even hold it. So I had to blow it out. So I learned that you have to light it and do it very quickly because the shot glass would get too hot. So did you ultimately
end up pouring 3 shots of 151 to accomplish this?
Which good riddance. I don't need to be drinking 151. I'm glad. I'm never going to touch that bottle again unless I need to light a barbecue or something. I burned through 3 shots.
And did it ultimately, so when you dropped it in the beer, did the flame like go out? Did you at least have that peace of mind of like, okay, I'm not putting literal flame to my face?
Yes. I knew that going in because I'd watched YouTube videos on how to make a flaming Dr. Pepper. I saw in the videos on YouTube that the flame goes out as soon as you drop it into the beer. So I had that peace of mind.
I don't think I've ever. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, so this is the nerdiest. Like, I'm Googling how to make a flaming Dr. Pepper, how to chug a beer. This is like the most embarrassing. I'm glad I don't know those things.
I think there are only two types of people in comedy, like particularly in like sort of like from sketch and improv backgrounds. There's either people who had never done this kind of thing in their background, and that's why they got into comedy instead of other stuff. And then there's people where it's like they would be like, I could make you a flaming Dr. Pepper right now. That my nickname in college was Flaming Dr. Pepper. Like, I feel like, and there's no in between.
Yeah, no.
And I think we're both in the, I would have to Google it camp.
Yes. Not to name names, but I think like one time I wrote a tweet that was like derogatory about keg stands, and I quickly heard from Gabrus disagreeing. No, keg stands are wonderful. And
well, he's in Gabrus is a man of the world, and Gabrus is also just like sort of the like sin eater for like just like true like I guess I would say like frat, what would I even call it, like frat Olympic type stuff. Sure. Like he's just the person that's like gonna have done that for like 90% of the other people in comedy. He's out there, you know, he's like the dude. He's taking it easy for all of us.
And I love that he's doing it. He's like my favorite person. It's the funniest. I love that he's the one taking it on in our name. It's,
absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Yes. He's drank like beer and shots and stuff out of like rugby dudes like boots. Like that's like a sign of respect. It's for sure. And his I mean, it's just amazing. You have to respect it. Did it taste like Dr. Pepper?
It did, and I actually don't like Dr. Pepper, so that's what made it doubly worse. I'm not a big Dr. Pepper fan, so it did taste a lot like Dr. Pepper. I guess that's the amaretto and the rum. I don't know the combination. I didn't learn that in chemistry in high school and college, but yeah, it tastes like Dr. Pepper.
I don't either, but I love imagining that somebody like a food scientist would be listening to this right now and being like, actually, if you know anything about how Dr. Pepper is made, it's just an extremely large scale flaming Dr. Pepper operation. Yeah.
So they're doing at the Dr. Pepper factory, just mixing Stella 151 and amaretto, and then like, I don't know, draining the alcohol from it. I don't know that process.
I think you just have to let it burn for a really, really, really long time.
Yes, exactly.
Till it's all burned off. That is, so were people, how was that greeted within the fantasy football group where people were like, okay, great, you did it. Did they love it? Is it sort of like par for the course? Because that's also not something that I have a ton of experience in.
Yeah, they loved it. They were over the moon about it. Yeah, we usually do like degrading bets in our fantasy football league, which I think is a common thing in fantasy football leagues. This one wasn't that bad, but yeah, they were excited to see it. Sent the video. I make this like face like I've just been punched in the stomach after I drank it, and so I think that there were a lot of like screen grabs of that sent around. I'm sure that photo is gonna follow me for a while.
That will persist for sure. Yeah, that will definitely become part of the iconography of the fantasy football league. What is have there been ones that you've come up with? Have you been surprised by the depths of your own prank sadism? Have there been any that you've just been like, that I love that?
No, they're usually not that bad. One guy lost a bet, and for like the next decade, his team name has to be "I have a clown butt," which I don't know. And your team has like a logo, and we found a photo on the internet of a guy like who painted a clown on his butt, and so that's his team logo. And it's just stuff like that, which is like sophomoric and dumb, and but brings me no end of joy.
I would love if that dude ended up becoming the real life Joker.
It's not without the realm of possibility. It's funny that I'm telling these stories because also the fantasy league I'm breaking, we have like a strict rule of omerta, like mafia style. Like you don't tell these stories outside.
Oh wow!
League. But I think it's fine. As long as I don't name names, I think it's fine.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm going to have to like upload this to like a secure server in international waters that would be in like a Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah, it's we take the omerta pretty seriously. We do. There's like people have broken omerta, and we've held tribunals on.
Oh my god.
We did a Zoom tribunal earlier on in the pandemic, but yeah, that's we have too much time on our hands.
I was going to ask, you are also a member, maybe a founder or a founding member of another organization that again is a real sort of like, just is as much as you feel willing to say about it, it's fine. And if not, but there's a Neil Young, like East Side of LA dad group that I'm aware of, that I was aware of before I really got into Neil Young, and I was just kind of like, oh, that sounds cool. I think maybe they have like a cover band or something. And then during the pandemic, for the most part, have gone on like a real Neil kick, especially over the summer, and have suddenly been like, wait, I think I need to have a kid because you need to have that's like part of it. So again, insofar as you can say.
It's two separate things. One is I play drums in a Neil Young cover band called the Cinnamon Boys. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is a thing called Music Club, which is like a secret dad's music club. Not so secret because I'm talking about it. But it's dads on the east side of LA that it started at a school in Pasadena, and it's dads from the school. The bass player in the Cinnamon Boys invited me to join. But it's a club where every month a year is picked, and everybody has to bring a song from that year and play it for the group. And you just like sit around and eat pizza and drink beer and like talk about the song you brought in. But yeah, during the pandemic, since it's not safe to meet, the group will go to the parking lot in the Rose Bowl, and we just like sit in our cars and somebody broadcasts the song over a radio signal. And we listen to them that way. But yeah, it's two separate things. I usually bring a Neil Young song because I'm known in the group as being like the biggest Neil. I play drums in a Neil Young cover band, so I'm the biggest Neil nerd. So, and also Neil Young has music literally from every year for the past 40 years. So there's always like a Neil Young song released in every year that you can bring.
What if you only ever brought songs from trans? Like this one's, I know we picked 1998, but he did this one song from Trans this year on this one tour.
Bring in different like live versions, because he'll play songs from Trans live. Bring in like live versions from Trans songs from every year that he's done them would be maddening to some people, I'm sure.
Yeah, for people who it kind of in that experience of like listening to, because I'm a big Best Show fan, and there was a spin-off that they did on their Patreon where it was like, which is such a good idea. It was basically like, we're going to go through chronologically every year of the output of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. And so their stuff together, their stuff before that band, their stuff after that band solo. And it's such an amazing like journey through truly the like agony and the ecstasy of 60s and post 60s, and basically like boomer, for lack of a less pejorative term, rock like that. It's just everything. It's all of the what was good about that, and like what got insanely overblown and bloated and cocaine-y about that. And that was really kind of what kicked me off into listening to a lot of that stuff, because it was like, it's the pandemic. I have a ton of time on my hands. I'm just going to like do the dishes and listen to, this like Stephen Stills disco album and just cringe. So go ahead. Are you a CSNY fan? Are you a Neil Young? That was an entry point for me, was my dad. My dad was not a big, like specifically Neil fan for whatever reason, but was really into Crosby, Stills, Nash, and I remember like just specifically like that first album got a ton of play, and then also like a decent amount of the 80s stuff, like Daylight Again or whatever, like that I just thought had super cool like covers, and just really. And I also think like that was in a period where David Crosby was having like a big comeback. Like I think he had like really conquered a lot of the like substance abuse issues and had like some good albums that were coming out in like the 90s. And that I just remember my dad being very into and like telling me about, and kind of like talking about like, oh yeah, this guy, he was like super messed up, and now he's back and he's doing it. And it's also funny to see how he looked then, like after kind of coming out of that tunnel, and then seeing him like when it's the 60s and he's like considered a huge sex symbol, and being like, it's the same guy. I don't get it. But yeah, so that was, I had always really, really liked and gone back to that first Crosby, Stills, Nash album, even as an adult, and just been like, it's one of those albums, and I feel like Fleetwood Mac Rumors fills this place for a lot of people our age as well, where it's just like, you can, if you're ever at a loss for just like, what do I put on when we're making dinner? Or what do I, it's just kind of like time to transition into the evening. It's like, you throw that on, you can listen to it you can't play it out. Like, you cannot wear that album.
Oh yeah. It's
out.
like wall to wall listenable. Just put it on in the background. Yeah, exactly. It's great. Like in your 30s, I'm cooking dinner music.
Precisely. And it's also like, which I feel like anyone that went to Woodstock would hear that and literally shoot themselves in the head, because they're like, wait, no, it meant something. It was dangerous. And it's like, haha, it's also good to like cook dinner to and be like, I heard a really interesting NYT's The Daily today. But I also remember that my other big association with it was, speaking of like being in your 20s in New York, my big McManus, the bar that everybody would go to like after like UCB shows and stuff, my big sort of like jukebox value pick was Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, because it was like, I'm getting like 3 songs in one, basically. It must have annoyed the shit out of people.
That's a great call. That's your go-to jukebox song. Wherever you go, like, yeah, what are your go-to? That's the McManus pick. Is that always your go-to jukebox pick?
It's a really, really good one, because like I said, it's a long song. It has but it has like a bunch of different movements to it. You're not going to get like bored of it. Totally. I feel like my biggest jukebox and also like, no matter what happens, by the end of that song, you're going to get to the part where it goes like do 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 do, and everybody's going to be like, oh great, the do 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 song. We love it. But I feel like my biggest jukebox misfire ever that I really learned, like, you really got to know what you're picking out, was my dad was also really into the band Rare Earth, that were like I think they were like among the first, if not the first, like white Motown signees. They were a kind of like 60s, 70s, like blue-eyed soul, like kind of jam band, basically. Yeah. And I just remember like kind of getting into, or like revisiting them around that time and being like, oh, they have a, oh God, what is this? It's like their famous song and it's a cover. And now I'm struggling to think of what it is, but basically it's this, it's like, it's a super famous song that you've heard like other artists do. And it's just like, oh yeah, that's a fun, good, oh, you know what? It's Get Ready.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
And so it's like a Motown song. I think it's like, I want to say it's like Smokey Robinson and the Miracles.
Sounds right. Yeah.
And I could be totally wrong about that. But so it's just like, oh yeah, it's a great fun, just like never been a girl, whatever, like it's a fun song. And so I put it on the jukebox, and come to find out, oh, the famous one is a like cut down version that's just that part from like a much longer live album version that is like maybe 40 minutes long. And it's just the most kind of like druggy, meandering, organy like exploration before they get to that point, for 3 minutes at the end of them playing the actual song. And so I played that thinking I was getting the 3-minute version, and I got way more than I bargained for. And suddenly we were in a like Scorsese montage of like people experiencing the depth of drug addiction.
Yeah, that's a rough pick on jukebox.
But so all that to say, what does like, what resonates about Neil Young for you? How did you get into him? Like what keeps you there? What keeps you being the Neil guy?
Oh man, this is such a great question. I like, my Neil fandom has like slowly increased from like childhood on. I know like when I turned 14, for my birthday, my parents gave me a turntable, and they gave me the Neil Young album Decade, his like greatest hits compilation. So it was like the first like vinyl record I owned, and was kind of into it. And then like I grew up in Northern California, not far from where Neil Young lived on his ranch.
Oh wow!
And he was always around. Like when I was in high school, the San Jose Sharks were a big thing. Like we lived near San Jose, and my family had tickets to see the San Jose Sharks, and he also had tickets to see the Sharks, so he sat like directly across the arena from us. And,
wow! Oh, I guess that makes. I mean, he's Canadian.
His dad was like a famous hockey journalist.
That's right. Yes.
And so he was like, I think hockey is in his blood, and he would bring his kids to the games. And there was like a little concourse for season ticket holders only, and I would go in between periods and like get a hot dog or whatever. And he would be sitting in the same spot alone every time. And I was also like a huge Pearl Jam fan in high school, and he around that time was playing a lot of Pearl Jam and made an album with them. So I was like very aware of him, and I never went up to talk to him, which I'm glad I didn't. But as I would like walk by with my hot dog and Coke, I would like make eye contact with him and like nod, and he would nod back, and that's like all I needed.
That is perfect.
I would see, and then also around like from the time I was in high school through college in the Bay Area in October around Halloween, he would do a benefit show every year called the Bridge School Benefit, which is to benefit. It's a school that he started for special needs kids because he had kids for special needs, and it was an all acoustic concert. And I would go every year, so I've seen him like dozens of times. But I was never like a diehard fan. It wasn't until I turned like 30 and was just like, I want to throw on Harvest while I'm cooking dinner in Greenpoint or whatever, and just like fell in love with it. And then we started the cover band in I know specifically when we started January 2017 because it was the day of the Women's March.
And you're like, meanwhile we're going to do the most straight white guy in America thing that we can possibly do, which is form a cover band, because it's like, okay, you guys are marching for your and other people's rights. We are going to be in here. We're fine. Our rights have been pretty secure the entire time. We'll be in here.
No, so I ran into my friend. I went to the march downtown, and I ran into my friend James downtown, and I was like, hey, we're headed back to my house. We want to come hang out. So it was such an inspiring day. We were like so fired up from the march that we came back to my house. And the thing is, like, at the time, I didn't really play drums. I have a drum set in my garage to fool around on. It was my brother's drum set. And so James comes over and we're just like so fired up from the march. It's like, let's go out to the garage and just jam. And so we went to the garage, and really like the first thing we played, being inspired by the day, was Rockin' in the Free World, which sounds so corny that we did. But we played Rockin' in the Free World for like half an hour straight. And we're like, that's a lot of fun. And like, it was so easy. Like Neil Young songs are so easy to play on the drums. It's like the most basic beat to all his stuff. And I was like, what else do you know? And we just like tore through like 10 Neil Young songs that were like the most basic 4/4 drum beats. And then the band just sort of spun off from there. And has played like pre-pandemic, we're playing like 10 backyard barbecues a year. So we mainly play backyard barbecues. We can play like an hour's worth of Neil songs. Super fun, like the most fun.
Do you feel like you've gained a different like insight into his music, or you're sort of like, oh, I kind of feel like I've like cracked the code on it in a different way from playing it than you had just listening?
Somewhat. I mean, a secret mission of the Cinnamon Boys, which we've like started to embark on in the pandemic, is that because we do play all Neil Young covers, a lot of them are obscure. So we made a decision to write Neil Young style songs and sneak them into our set and see if people would notice that we're. So yeah, we sort of started to pick up on like Neil-isms. His songs are just like deceptively simple. Like the drums are usually like just so basic. The drums and the bass are. He's one of those guys where it's just about the song. He doesn't want anything very show-offy. And yeah, songs about like redwood trees and I don't know what else to think about. But yeah, I don't know if I've had any like big insights. I've mostly just been like in the course of the band have like learned to play the drums, which has been fun.
That's super cool. Yeah, I feel like I ordered as myself for like a treat of like, well, I haven't spent money on hardly anything I would normally spend money on. I'm going to get this like giant Neil Young biography because I've just been into him, that book Shaky.
Oh yeah.
That was written.
Love that book.
Oh yeah. So good. Yeah. So it is in that being written, it was written over years, and there was like a big legal fight over it, but like there was, and it's coming out kind of in that period of time that you're describing where he's sort of being reborn as this kind of like grunge or post-grunge like saint almost, and like super embraced by like really contemporary bands at the time like Pearl Jam. But it's so fun. It's such a funny through line of the book that like everyone around him is mad at how bad Crazy Horse is, this band that
Yes.
he is effectively his E Street Band, although they kind of pre-existed and sort of were their own entity and kind of have been their own entity throughout the years. And just everyone around him, including the author of the book, clearly, who can't help but like editorialize a lot, and that's kind of what makes it such a unique, fun book, is just like, are clearly these like huge music heads, huge audiophiles, and are just like, they sound so fucking bad. And I, as somebody that I'm like, I don't play an instrument, I don't listen to music in that way. Whenever I listen to like a Neil Young Crazy Horse thing, I'm not like picking up on like bum notes. It just sounds awesome. But it's interesting to me that it's just sort of like, I don't know, that is clearly a frustration that people around him feel, or maybe they don't anymore, but clearly did at some point, of like, why does he keep playing with these guys that aren't as good as his music is? And he clearly like values something about that, much in the same way that I like remember reading about like Joe Strummer being like, the best way to like listen to music is on like a shitty transistor radio with like one headphone and like listening to like AM radio, because that's just how you get the like most pure, I don't know, whatever, you know, like that aesthetic or ethos that I do think there really is something
yeah,
too.
I love Shaky. Shaky is such a good book that the author Jimmy McDonough, like, even if you're not a Neil Young fan, it's rare to read a book where the writer like locks horns with the subject. Like he'll call him out on, like, I think at some point he calls him out saying like, why are you playing with Pearl Jam? Like, they suck. And like, he'll say that to his face. And it's pretty amazing. But yeah, about like Crazy Horse, I'm, again, like I'm saying, I'm not a good drummer. I learned to play drums in this band, and the two guys who I play with are phenomenal musicians. And something that we learned or observed in playing Neil Young songs is, in modern music, like a big thing with the beat, the BPM, the beats per minute is like steady throughout, because most stuff is recorded digitally these days. And if you listen, like we listened to Cinnamon Girl, and like the BPM in that song starts at like 120 beats per minute, and by the end of the song they're up to like 160. Like, they speed, like, because it's such a good song, they're excited to play it. And they're like, wow. And they're getting like adrenaline like as they play, and they get faster. And the guys I play with, like, you would never hear that in anything recorded like post 1975. It's people speeding up the song as they go. And it's something that I don't notice when I listen to the song, but they picked up on it. They're like, yeah, Crazy Horse, like, those guys are just like running on adrenaline, and the beat speeds up in almost all the songs they play.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's so interesting. I mean, it's also like this is just now becoming the Chris Farley show, but for Neil Young. That's just the coolest song ever. Like, there's even if you're not a Neil Young fan, like, just to listen to that song and just being like, there has never been a song that like more personifies. It's just like, this is how cool rock and roll can sound. It sounds like, I don't know, it's the best. I never really like, that was a big revelation for me when I started like actually going back and like listening to Neil Young records. I think I maybe even started listening to that one a couple years ago, even before the sort of like the Best Show series about it, and just being like, oh, holy shit, this is the coolest like sounding thing ever. I just didn't think of, when I thought of Neil Young, I do think I just thought of like, I think he's a guy that I remember seeing on MTV in the 90s, and he had a harmonica, and he was like very earnest, and his hat looked very worn in, and just, you know, just not associating him with like any of the sounds that he's actually like responsible for.
I was 100% the same way, even though I was like encountering him a lot as a teenager. Like, I thought he was just this old guy. Like, I didn't appreciate the music till much later, even though it was like all around me at all points.
He's also one of those people where you're just like, can we just vaccinate him like as soon as humanly possible, please?
Yes. Yeah, he has an app. I bought the app. You have to like subscribe to it, where it's like his music player. Yeah, and he released videos. He's like out in the snow, like playing songs someplace during all this. God bless him. Seems like
that's kind of what you would want. Also, I guess I if you had to pick an artist where you're like, you're probably good on just being solitary and not seeing very many people, and you have a lot of space, and you're not like crammed in anywhere, and you don't need like a big entourage, he would be who I would pick.
Oh, completely. Yeah, 100%. Wait, I'm curious. What, you grew up in Arizona. What was your music scene growing up? Were you like a hip hop kid, punk kid? Like, what was?
It was very, I mean, like I had like, there was this weird kind of like, again, like post grunge, mid to late 90s, like Arizona, like these like Tempe, Arizona bands, which is where ASU is. It's like, it's part of the like Phoenix metro area, that my dad was really into. I mean, he was, by that time he was, you know, he would have been like as old as I am now. So like had no real reason to be like in touch with like music that people in their like teens and 20s were into. But he was, really into like the like Gin Blossoms. There was a band called The Refreshments that had like, they were kind of a one-hit wonder who weirdly ended up doing the theme to King of the Hill was The Refreshments. And that was my first concert. I had gotten into them, seeing them on MTV, being aware that they were like from Arizona. They had very sort of like southwesterny like imagery. And then their lead singer went on to form a band called Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers that my dad stayed super into, that I never really got super into. So I was kind of steeped in like a lot of that stuff, but then also just like, I don't know, I would like play Warcraft 2 and listen to a lot of like musical cast recordings and stuff. It was sort of a pastiche. There was a lot of Weird Al, like I think a lot of people in comedy. And then once I got into high school, it was a weird thing of being like, all my friends are into pop punk. A lot of them are in pop punk bands, and they're like obsessed with like California and like and Southern California, and we're super close to it. And think I'm better than that, and I'm like reading about like indie music on the AV Club and stuff like that. And then right at the very end of high school, I was like, wait a minute, I like all the shit my friends were into. It's actually really good. And now I have a very big like largely I think nostalgic, but also just like genuinely enjoy listening to like kind of that like kind of early emo-y like Get Up Kidsy type stuff. I did end up getting super into. So that was the kind of like the mix that I was into. But we would go to a lot of like pop punky shows and got into like a lot of like local bands and stuff. Did you grow up so right, like you said, you did grow up in Northern California and kind of went to school in that. Were you steeped in that as well, or were you more like, you know, like Bay Area hip hop, or where were you on the spectrum?
Yeah, completely. Like when I was like 11 years old, my mom bought me Nevermind, and so I was like a huge grunge kid from like in junior high, just like obsessed with grunge.
Man, how many copies of Nevermind do you think were purchased by moms? It had to be at least like 50%, right?
So many of them must have been. I know, like, I remember I went to the store was called Music Plus, and I went with my mom and my sister, and I bought Nevermind, and my sister bought a single called "I Love Your Smile" by an R&B singer named Shanice, I think. And so, like,
sure, yeah, that's a big nostalgic '90s. Just like you feel like you're in a Ross Dress for Less, waiting for a dressing room.
Yes.
And it's 1995.
Completely. Sure. But yeah, you're so right though. It's funny that like Nirvana is this like thought of as this revolutionary band, but I think their audience was mostly like 11-year-old kids where like the mom bought the CD. I don't know if like
and they were like, I don't know how I feel, but I think it can be best described by like a picture of Eddie Furlong in Terminator 2.
Yes, no, completely. I think that's who the audience was. But yeah, so I was into grunge for high school or for junior high. Then in high school, I got super into pop punk, especially the Lookout Records pop punk scene, which was nearby in Berkeley. And yeah, weirdly, I know I got into the pop punk scene in the Bay Area. There was a magazine called BAM, Bay Area Music, which would cover bands like the Mr. T Experience, the High Fives, all these like Lookout Records pop punk bands. And I didn't find out 2 years later that BAM was founded and run by Darcy Carden's dad.
No way, really?
Yeah. And that like still to this day, I write music journalism. I was like completely inspired by that magazine. But yeah, that magazine turned me on to the pop punk scene in the Bay Area. And and around that time, like when I was in junior high, I started a grunge band called Mall Security. And
perfect name.
And we started as a grunge band. Like we only played like Nirvana covers. And then as pop punk, we got into that. We shifted to that. And then by the late 90s, the whole scene near where I was, near Santa Cruz, was all ska. And like we were not a ska band. But because all the shows that we're booking were ska shows, we started to like incorporate ska rhythms into our songs. So we might have been like the only ska grunge band ever. It was a horrible combination.
I can't believe I'm talking to the founder of the scunge genre.
That's me, yeah. But yeah, and so weirdly, the guys who I play with now in the Cinnamon Boys, they were in the biggest ska band on the scene at the time, which is a band called Slow Gherkin. And like, I'm still kind of in awe that I get to play with the guys.
Such a perfect ska band name.
Yes.
Model Security was a perfect grunge / pop punk name. Slow Gherkin, extremely perfect ska name. Yes. I already know what the logo is. I'm set.
Phenomenal band. Look them up if you're into late 90s ska. They're really great. They're more like a rock with horns thing. But yeah, and similarly, like as you like, when I went to college, it was like Get Up Kids and like emo stuff was happening. And so yeah, some similar stuff.
How do you, if you do, like, stay in touch with new music? Because I definitely find myself being like, I kind of thought like, I'll always be up on the whatever. And then it's sort of like, you get to a point where you're just like, I think I'm just going to listen to this giant playlist of every song that came out in 1969 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there does get to be a weird departure point. Do you find yourself like still staying in touch with that? Have you let it go and reached a peace with it? Like how do you strike that balance?
I mean, I've somewhat let it go because for a few years I was the music editor, quote unquote, at a paper magazine. And so because I had that job, I still get emails from music publicists every day, all day. And so they're like constantly like in my like promotions folder on Gmail, I'm getting emails about new music. So I'll like look through those to see if anything like catches my eye or ear. But it's hard in the pandemic because I would say the main way I would get into new music is like going to a record store and asking like what's new and good. And I haven't had the ability to do that. So yeah, in the past year, and also yeah, I think like being a parent now, there's a lot of Raffi in the house, so it's like less time to listen to like whatever.
Between him and Neil, it's a very Canadian music diet.
Oh man, yes, I love Raffi. I gotta like. Come clean. Raffi, I think, absolutely rules, and he's a good follow on social media too. He's very a member of the resistance.
Oh, that's nice to hear. I definitely grew up on a pretty steady diet, and my wife and I were just re-listening to it recently because it was one of those things where a weird little thing will get stuck in your head, and you'll be like, "What is that?" And then realizing like, "Oh, it's a fucking Raffi song."
Yes, yeah. He has some songs that are like deep cut covers of like obscure French pop songs that he'll like bury on side B of his albums. And yeah, you'll like, wow, that's Raffi covering what? But yeah, he's got to be like in his late 70s, maybe 80. And like, yeah, on social media, on Instagram, he'll post these photos of himself like at a record store, like in a 5-panel hat and like a Patagonia thing. He's like holding up all his album. Like this is like a hipster's dream. This is like what everybody my age is like aspiring to be, like holding up your albums in a record store wearing some ridiculous cool outfit. I don't know. Yeah, Raffi's I'm down with Raffi.
That's awesome. Well, people who we hope are already at least one dose deep on the vaccine.
Yes.
So, Alex Scordelis, final question. If there was anything in the world, either something that you and your wife maybe had at like a really fancy meal one time, or just something you grew up eating, or anywhere in between, if there was one thing that you don't already know how to make that you could snap your fingers and know how to make perfectly, what would it be?
This is such a hard question because yeah, there've been like so many great meals in my lifetime, but I think I'd have to opt for something a little like nostalgic, like something that a grandparent made. Like being Greek, I call my grandfather Papu on my mom's side, and he grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and being from Kansas, he made amazing ribs. And he was also a soda jerk when he was a kid, so he knew how to make an amazing milkshake. So he'd like milkshake and ribs. It's a weird combo, but like, and I'm sure I would like. I mean, he would make like a hot dog with milkshake. I don't know if we had ribs with that, but his ribs, his milkshake, like that's. If I could snap my fingers and know how he made those so perfectly, that's what I would go for.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's one of those combinations that you're like, it only makes sense if it hits a certain Venn diagram in your head emotionally. It sounds like it does. I mean, I like both of those things individually. I'm down to try them together. And definitely maybe wait a day or two after I eat that 13 by 13 or whatever I'm going to have.
It's a good call, yeah.
Thanks so much for doing this, man.
Thank you, DC. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
All right, that's it. That is all for this week's episode of Stay for Dinner. Thank you so much to my guest, Alex Scordelis. You can follow him at Alex Scordelis wherever you follow people, pretty much Twitter, Instagram. Check him out. He is so funny and great. I really, really enjoyed talking to him. If you liked the show, please rate and subscribe to it wherever you do that for podcasts. Also be sure to leave a review and hopefully rate it highly. That helps more people find the show, and that in turn helps there be more show. My intro music is July 4th, 2004 by Jason Anderson. I usually say that, but I think I forgot about the music credits last week. Whoops, that is why I am not NPR, but thank you to Jason. Check him out on Spotify. He has a ton of new music coming out all the time. He's just insanely talented, insanely prolific. Speaking of talented and prolific, Advanced Bass, the amazing Owen Ashworth did my interstitial music. Sarah Beacon, Becan, did the podcast illustration for my cover art there, and I have a couple of novels, The Boy Who Couldn't Sleep and Never Had To and Crap Kingdom, that are available wherever books are distributed. Please check them out, or at your local library, or on audible.com. I read both of them, the audiobook versions of both of them, if you like hearing me talk. I think that's everything. Have a good week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.